The Kemper Profiler. I first heard about the Kemper in 2016, and if you were like me and you grew up with tube amps, you might have had a little bit of resistance towards digital profiling. And this was back in 2016, and now digital profiling has come a really, really long way, and people have been able to get incredible results without having, you know, actual amps that they're recording, but just loading and recording, profiles. When I first heard about the Kemper, my first impression, I was a pretty big hater. I didn't think this would really take off. I didn't think this would be successful. And it's just because of the history that I had. I grew up playing Vox AC15s and Fender Twin Reverbs. And then the last amp that I had a Matchless Clubman, and it was just the most beautiful, you know, Class A tube amplifier, hand wired. It was just absolutely incredible. And so to be told that, okay, we have this new thing called the Kemper, that's a digital profile of it. There's no tubes in it. I was immediately kind of taken aback of just thinking, okay, is this even legit? That was back in 2016, and fast forward to 2024, and I just got the Kemper. And I have to say, there's a lot of really good strengths to this amp, and there are a couple of things that I wish I had known when I had bought it, and let's dive into that. So first, this is an absolutely incredible thing if you are recording guitars. If you need to have access to all different types of sounds and you don't necessarily want to stick to one type of amp sound, I can't think of anything better than the Kemper. You can, profiles are actually really not that expensive, so you can get, professionally profiled, Kemper sounds like Fender amps, Vox amps, Marshall, all that kind of good stuff. And you're kind of at the mercy of which mics they use to profile that specific amp, because that's what it's going to sound like when you're playing through the profile. So I would suggest take a look at the packs that are for sale out there and just see how they're recording some of the different profiles. I've seen some from Michael Britt that I really like, and they seem to be, I think he uses a Fathead ribbon mic and then also an SM57. And I seem to really, really like that combo. You have other profiles out there that, might have more of a mid-range focus, but if you can find a profile that has an amazing mic combination between the two different mics that they use to create that profile, you'll be in a good spot. This also makes recording a lot easier, but that's a good thing, and also it's a little bit of a bad thing. And that's because, you have these profiles at your fingertips. You don't really get to choose how much of this microphone you want in your recording versus that other microphone. It's already kind of pre-selected for you
What's
in the
up?
profile. So if you're somebody who likes to who enjoys,
Yeah.
miking guitars and getting that perfect blend of,
Yeah, 1 second.
two different microphone sounds, and
Okay.
really fine tuning where you're placing the microphone, if it's on axis or off axis. If you really like to have control over that in the recording process, you're probably not going to like this as much, because you're at the mercy of however this person profiled that specific amp for you. So for recording guitars, that's what I mean when it's both a good thing and a bad thing, because if you like to have control, then you're not going to have as much control. But if you want something to just kind of give you like 80% of the sound, 80 to 85% of the sound, then you're in a good place. You find a profile that you like of a Vox or a Fender amp, and boom, all you have to do is just plug in your guitar and you already have that profile set up for you. And so I think this is really advantageous when you have to record a lot of different guitar parts through a lot of different types of amps. And if you're, in a studio apartment, and I'm kind of in a smaller apartment in LA, that's a big plus for me just because I don't have too much space and I can record via XLR or TRS out from the Kemper. And then you also have like a direct out, which is kind of like a raw DI sound from your guitar. So that's helpful for reamping. If you want to change the sound, there's just a lot of flexibility when it comes to recording your guitars. So recording guitars is really easy. And then I would say the second thing that is great about the Kemper, you can play and you can plug it in with your headphones and you can turn up the preamp gain and you can really get a feel like you would with an amplifier. It's not quite the same. Not exactly quite the same like playing through an amplifier and dialing in the preamp and the distortion on the guitar amp. But you get most of the way there with the Kemper. And so being able to play in an apartment with headphones on and you're cranking an amp and it's just your neighbors don't have to hear it, that's a tremendous plus. Honestly, that's probably one of the biggest reasons why I got a Kemper. If you like to play live, the Kemper gives you such a ready-to-go sound because of just the signal chain that's available. You have a gate and you have stomp boxes and effects, and then delays and reverbs and effects loops. You really have everything you kind of need, and then if you have your own pedals, you can plug those in too. But you can get a very, very polished sound right off of the bat with a Kemper. And so if you're playing live, I think this is an incredible option. And you've seen more bands rely on digital profiling like Kempers or other digital profiles out there, and it's replacing their amps on the road while they're doing these shows. And so if you're playing live and you need to reduce stage volume, like Kempers are absolutely fantastic. They already are profiled with a mic to a cabinet, and so it's really ideal for playing live. And I think those are the three biggest things, the biggest positives about a Kemper. Okay, this is what's a little weird to me, and I didn't think about this until I actually had it. If you grew up playing with amplifiers, right? Maybe you have like a 5-watt amp inside of your house or your apartment. When you plug in the headphone jack, into your Kemper, it's pretty weird because you're hearing the profile of the amp, right? You're hearing basically microphones up against a cabinet. But when you grow up playing with an amp in your house or in your apartment, you don't realize how much of the guitar sound that you hear and that's kind of stored in your memory is actually the room sound, if that makes sense. So I remember putting on headphones and listening to a Kemper for the first time. I thought it was really unnatural because you're basically sticking your ear against this guitar cabinet and hearing how it sounds. Versus when you're at your house, you're hearing your amplifier speaker, project sound into your room. And so a lot of like your guitar sound that you hear is the room itself. So if you grew up with that, that's kind of the weird thing that I still can't get over. It still feels a little strange to me. But then in the context of a mix, it's completely fine because unless you want, room sound through your amplifier. But in a mix, it's completely fine. But if you're just at home and you're just like listening to yourself play through the headphones, it's a little strange. I have the unpowered version of the Kemper, which means you cannot plug it into a speaker so that you can, plug it into a speaker cabinet. I kind of wish I had gotten that so I would have the flexibility of plugging my Kemper and being able to have the option to plug it through a speaker cabinet and just hear it through the room. I'm actually kind of regretting not having the powered version. So if you like to hear your guitar amp inside of a room, I would definitely recommend the powered version. Because this is a digital profiler, I do feel like it sounds a bit digital to me. And yes, they are profiling tube amps, things like that. But I still feel the need, after I record tracks, I feel like I still need to give it some tube love. So I feel like the Kemper for live, yeah, it's great because, there's so many imperfections that you're fighting against in live. But if you're recording something in the studio, I feel like you need a little bit of tube goodness to impart into your Kemper sound, like whether it's, you know, if you have a powered version, a tube microphone or a tube EQ, like a Pultec, or tube compressor, like an LA2A. I still find myself wanting to impart some tube flavor when I record tracks off of the Kemper. And I think that's just because it needs a little bit of analog color when you are recording it. So I think Kempers sound great live. You can play it and you can get away with it. But if you're in the studio, I think you should probably get some kind of tube hardware to kind of make your guitar sound a little bit more livelier. But then again, in the mix, it's really, really even hard to tell. But let's say you're just kind of recording just one guitar track and that's all that you're recording, and it's not in the context of a band. I think you're going to really hear the difference a lot more than if it was just in a full-on mix. You might not hear it as much. For the Kemper effects, I think you're going to be a lot better suited if you rely on some of the color through your pedal board and using the Kemper more as just kind of a flat platform. I don't necessarily suggest using some of the onboard effects. Just kind of growing. Some of the reverbs sound good, but then some of them also sound really cold and digital and pretty fake, not in a great way. I actually really like the compressor on the Kemper. You can do parallel compression, and you have some other effects like chorus and vibrato and other things like that. Some of the modulation effects are pretty decent. I also like some of the EQs that they have on there. They have a graphic EQ, which is pretty great. And then they have a studio equalizer, which you can adjust the Q and has a couple of bands. And I thought that was really awesome. And it's on top of the regular tone control that the Kemper amplifier has. I also think you should probably get your own overdrive pedal and then kind of use that to get like an amp breakup sound through the Kemper. Honestly, my favorite effect is probably not an effect, but it's the gate. Being able to put a gate up front in your signal chain is pretty amazing, and this goes back to what I was talking about with just getting a polished sound. You clean up all of the amp noise, pickup noise, and it's such a simple gate. You just have a threshold, and that's that. It's just literally one knob, and it works really intuitively. It's a really smart gate for guitars. And that just kind of cleans up your sound so much, and it does a lot to just take out some of the mud and give you a really nice polished sound. So having the gate has been great just so that when I record guitars through the Kemper, I'm not having to fight through so much of just the mud and the hiss and the hum and all that kind of stuff. One of the reasons I sold my Matchless was it ate tubes so often. There were so many repairs that it needed, which I was a little shocked by. There's just so much maintenance that goes into some of these tube amplifiers, and that's maybe another favorite thing of the Kemper is you don't really have to worry about that, and the maintenance is extremely low. I bought my Kemper used. There's like 1,000 profiles in here from somebody else who paid for all these. My favorite one is definitely the Michael Britt profiles. He did a really, really great job at some of the profiles he did for Fender and Vox. And after going through so many of these profiles on the Kemper that I have, I was actually surprised by my favorite profile. My favorite profile that I've come across is the Swart AST. I'm really, really in awe of how great that amp sounds, and it makes me want to get a real one. I play like Fender Strats, Fender Jazzmaster, so I like that really mid-range scoop sound. And I would describe the Swart AST as it's kind of like a cousin of Fender, but I feel like the way that the low end is shaped on the Swart AST and how the harmonics also tie into how the harmonics play with the pickups, I was just absolutely kind of floored. And I think this was one of the only profiles where I was just literally in shock of how good it sounded. The way that it broke up, the clean sound. I don't know, it's somewhere. The clean sound is like a Fender. It's like a Fender Deluxe, but with more like manageable low end. And then the way that it breaks up is kind of how I imagine in my head, like how I wanted a Vox AC30 to break up. It's weird. It's the Swart AST has got like these flavors of Vox, Matchless, and Fender, and it's all in a really small amp, and I was just really blown away. So that is my only profile suggestion. Take a look at the Swart AST if you like that type of a sound for guitars, and I think you would be pretty pleased. I'm really happy with the Kemper, and I don't regret buying it at all. I suggest it if you're in a studio apartment, if you've got a baby and you need to hear your amp cranked but you can't wake up the baby. I mean, this is pretty killer for that. You do have other digital profiles out there like Fractal, and then there's this other one that it's on the tip of my tongue, but I'm forgetting about it. But there's another one out there that people are liking. But digital profiling has come a long way, and I was once a hater, and I'm a big fan of this. You still do need to add, I think, some tube processing, tube EQ, tube compression to kind of make it sound a little bit more livelier. But it's all about context. It's all about context about how you're hearing the guitar in a mix, if you're hearing it live or in the studio. And so it really is kind of a case-by-case basis. But Kemper has done a really good job on just kind of outlining the whole signal flow from your guitar all the way to your amp. And it just makes it very intuitive. I haven't read the manual, and I don't really feel like I need to. I feel like just being able to play with it for the past couple of months has given me just good information, it's giving me a good grasp on how this amp sounds. And yeah, I give it a thumbs up. I give it a thumbs up. What it does well, it does extremely well. If you like this video, please be sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe for more content. And thanks for watching.